You work harder than everyone around you. You solve problems. You stay late. You carry the weight. And when the weekend finally comes, you sit down with everything you want. Good food, entertainment, comfort, silence, and you feel nothing. Not peace, not satisfied. Just a quiet, creeping emptiness that you can't explain and don't want to admit exists. You distract yourself. You scroll. You plan the next thing. You tell yourself you're tired. But the feeling doesn't leave. It just sits there, under everything, like a shadow you can't outrun. Your relationship is stable. You've checked every box. You're present. You communicate. You give attention. You make an effort. And yet when you look at her, you feel a strange distance. Not anger, not resentment, just a kind of dull fatigue. Like you're performing a role that used to mean something and now exhausts you. You don't say it out loud because it sounds ungrateful, but you feel it, and you wonder why having what you wanted doesn't feel like winning. You're out with friends, everyone's laughing, the energy is good, you're participating, but somewhere in the middle of the conversation, you disconnect. You're there, but you're not. You're watching yourself perform the motions of connection, and it feels hollow. You leave feeling more alone than when you arrived. And you start to realize that even pleasure, even the things that are supposed to feel good, leave you empty the moment they end. Here's what no one told you. You were raised to believe that if you did the right things, worked hard, stayed decent, and pursued enjoyment, that life would feel meaningful. You were trained to be useful, to be accommodating, to seek approval, to find worth in how much you give and how little you demand. And now you're standing in the middle of a life that looks successful from the outside, and inside you feel nothing, because meaning was never in the pursuit, it was never in the pleasure, and it was never going to come from being rewarded for your obedience. Arthur Schopenhauer understood this in a way most people never will. He didn't write philosophy to comfort you. He wrote it to strip away the illusion, and what he saw was simple. Life is will endless, blind, insatiable will. You are not pursuing happiness. You are being driven by a force that uses you, burns through you, and discards you the moment you stop moving. Pleasure is not relief, it's a brief pause in suffering. And the moment you get what you want, the wanting starts again. That's not pessimism, that's structure. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. In this video, you're going to hear 7 psychological truths that will reverse the way you see your own life. Not to make you feel better, but to make you see clearly, because clarity is the only real power you have. Most people will click away before the second shift. They'll call this depressing. They'll say it's too dark. That's fine. Let them leave. This isn't for people who need comfort. This is for the ones who are tired of pretending that everything makes sense when it clearly doesn't. If you stay, you will understand why chasing satisfaction keeps you empty, why even your wins feel hollow. Why does the life you built not feel like yours, and what you can do once you stop believing the story you were sold. Put your phone face down and listen. This will not feel good, but it will feel true. And if this hit you, write "I am the strategist" once in the comments, just to mark the day your mindset changed. You've been taught that happiness is the goal, that if you work hard, stay disciplined, build the right life, eventually you'll arrive at a place where you feel good, where things feel complete, where the striving stops and the peace begins. So you chase it, you optimize your routine, you hit your goals, you improve your situation. And when you finally get there, when you finally have the thing you wanted, you feel a brief flicker of satisfaction. And then it fades, within hours, sometimes minutes, and the emptiness returns heavier than before. You don't talk about it because it sounds like failure. It sounds like you're broken. But you're not broken, you're just finally noticing the structure. Schopenhauer called it the will to live. A blind, relentless force that drives you toward goals not because they will fulfill you, but because the system needs you moving. You are not the author of your desires, you are the vehicle. And every time you achieve something, they will generate a willingness and send you back into motion. You think you're chasing happiness. You're not. You're chasing the following command. Here's the shift. pleasure is not the opposite of suffering. Pleasure is the temporary absence of a specific suffering. You're hungry, you eat, the pain stops. You're lonely, you connect, the ache pauses. You're bored, you stimulate yourself, the discomfort fades. But none of it builds, none of it lasts. The moment the pleasure ends, the suffering resumes. And because you've been conditioned to believe that happiness is cumulative, that it builds toward something permanent, you'll keep chasing. But it doesn't make. It resets every single time. You got the promotion, you felt suitable for a weekend. Then you started worrying about the next level. You got the relationship. You felt relief for a month. Then you started feeling the weight of maintaining it. You bought the thing. You enjoyed it for a day. Then it became invisible. This isn't because you're ungrateful. It's because satisfaction is not a destination. It's a biological trick to keep you hunting. Now look at your behavior. You optimize everything. You track your progress. You refine your habits. You build systems to be more efficient, more productive, more capable. And every time you improve, you feel a short burst of validation. Then it vanishes. Because the improvement didn't free you, it just raised the baseline. Now you're expected to perform at that level forever. The goal didn't liberate you. It locked you into a new standard. And the moment you slip, you feel like you're failing. You're not failing. You're just noticing that the treadmill speeds up every time you catch your breath. Here's what most men never see. The system doesn't want you satisfied. It wants to be useful. It wants you striving, producing, complying, and improving. Because a satisfied man stops moving, he stops consuming, he stops performing. He becomes useless to the structure. So the structure makes sure satisfaction is always just out of reach. It gives you just enough progress to keep you hoping, just enough pleasure to keep you obedient, and just enough emptiness to keep you hungry. You accepted the frame that your worth is tied to your output. You believed that if you produced enough, achieved enough, optimized sufficiently, that you'd finally feel like you'd earned your place. But that frame was never designed to set you free. It was designed to extract value from you until you burn out. And the moment you stop producing, the moment you pause, you feel guilt. Not because you're lazy, but because you internalize the belief that your existence is only justified by your utility. Schopenhauer saw this. He understood that life is not a progression toward meaning. It's a cycle of desire, temporary satisfaction, and renewed desire. And the only way out is not through more pleasure. It's through less attachment to the idea that pleasure will ever be enough. You stop chasing satisfaction and you start recognizing the will for what it is. A mechanism, not a promise. You're in a relationship. You care about her. You give attention, time, and presence. And yet, the more you give, the less you feel. Not because she's wrong. Not because you're broken. But because you've been conditioned to believe that love is sacrifice. That connection is maintenance. That intimacy is performance. So you perform. And every time you do, a small part of you disappears. You stop noticing it at first. But over time you realize you've become a function. Not a person. A role. Not a presence. Here's the mechanism. When you attach your identity to your utility in someone else's life, you stop existing as yourself. You become the provider, the stabilizer, the solution, and every time you meet a need, you feel a brief moment of validation. But that validation isn't respected. It's confirmation that you're still useful. And the moment you stop being useful, the moment you need something, the dynamic shifts. You're no longer the anchor, you're the burden, and you feel it immediately. This is why even good relationships feel heavy. You're not connecting, you're managing, you're maintaining, you're making sure the system stays functional, and the system rewards you with stability. But stability is not passion. It's not intensity, it's not present. It's just the absence of conflict, and you've mistaken that absence for peace. Schopenhauer would tell you that romantic love is the will using you to reproduce, that the intensity you feel at the beginning is not connected. It's a biological strategy. The system makes you believe you've found meaning in another person because it needs you to bond long enough to continue the species. And once that function is served, The intensity fades. What's left is not love, it's a habit. And you either accept the habit and call it maturity, or you chase the intensity again, repeating the cycle. You were taught that love is unconditional, that if you give enough, care enough, stay present enough, you'll be valued. But value is always conditional. It's always based on scarcity. And the moment you become abundant, available, and predictable, you lose leverage. Not because she's cruel, but because human psychology assigns worth to what it can't fully control. You gave too much, you made yourself too available, and now you're confused as to why the dynamic feels flat. Here's the shift. You stop performing. You stop trying to be needed. You start creating distance not as punishment, but as reclamation. You stop explaining yourself. You stop seeking reassurance. You stop managing her emotions, and you watch what happens. Most of the time, the dynamic corrects, because you stopped being the solution and became a presence again, and presence has weight, utility does not. But if the dynamic doesn't correct, if the distance reveals that you were only valued for function, then you just learned the truth early, and the truth is always more valuable than the illusion of connection. You don't stay because it's comfortable, you stay because it's real, and if it's not real, you walk. Not with anger, with clarity. You're sitting with your friends, everyone's talking, laughing, and sharing stories, and you're participating, you're engaged. But somewhere in the back of your mind you feel it, the performance. You're saying the right things, you're matching the energy, but none of it feels true. It feels like you're playing a character, and when you leave you feel more alone than you did before you arrived. Here's what happened. You spent years learning how to fit in, how to be agreeable, how to avoid conflict, how to make people comfortable. And in the process, you erased yourself. You stopped saying what you actually think, because it might create tension. You stopped expressing what you actually feel, because it might be too much. You stopped being present, because presence requires risk. And risk makes people uncomfortable, so you became safe, predictable, easy to be around. And now, no one really knows you. They know the version of you that makes them comfortable, and that version is exhausting to maintain, because it's not you, it's a defense, and every time you perform it you feel the distance between who you are and who you're pretending to be. Schopenhauer understood that most human interaction is transactional. People connect not because they value you, but because you serve a function. You provide entertainment, you provide entertainment, you provide validation, you provide comfort, and as long as you continue to deliver, the connection remains. But the moment you stop, the moment you need something, the connection weakens, because it was never about you, it was about what you offered. This is why you feel empty around people who seem to care about you. Because they don't care about you, they care about the role you play. And you've been playing that role for so long that you've forgotten it's a role. You think that's who you are. It's not. It's who you became to survive social rejection. And now, you're trapped in a persona that everyone likes and no one knows. Here's the shift. You stop performing. You stop managing the room. You stop making people comfortable. You say what you think, even if it creates silence. You express what you feel, even if it's inconvenient. You stop filling space with noise and let the space exist. And you watch who stays. Most people will leave, not because they hate you, but because they don't know what to do with you when you're not performing. And that's fine. Let them leave. They were never connected to you. They were attached to your function. And the ones who stay, the ones who don't need you to perform, those are the only ones worth keeping. You've been taught that saying less makes you invisible. That silence is weakness. That if you're not constantly engaging, explaining, and defending, you'll be forgotten. So you talk. You justify. You explain your decisions. You protect your choices. And every time you do, you hand over authority. Because the moment you describe yourself, you've accepted that someone else has the right to evaluate you. Here's the truth. Explanation is submission. Every time you justify your behavior, you're stepping into someone else's frame of reference. You're allowing them to set the standard. You're accepting that their judgment matters more than your own. And once you do that, you've lost. Not because they're powerful, but because you gave them power. Schopenhauer would tell you that most people assert authority by forcing you to react. They ask questions not to understand, but to position you beneath them. They challenge your decisions not because they care, but because they want to see if you'll defend yourself. And the moment you do, they've won because you've accepted the premise that you owe them an answer. You see this everywhere. Someone questions your choice. You explain. They push back. You explain more. Now you're in a debate you never agreed to, defending a position you didn't need to protect to someone whose opinion has no material impact on your life. And by the end, you feel drained, not because the conversation mattered, but because you spent energy protecting yourself from an evaluation you should have ignored. Here's the shift. You stop explaining. Someone questions your decision. You don't engage. You don't justify. You don't defend. You just let the silence sit. And in that silence, they either move on or reveal that they were never asking a question. They were testing your frame. And when you don't react, when you don't step into their frame, they lose leverage. This applies everywhere. At work, someone implies you're not doing enough. You don't defend your output. You let the implication sit. If it's baseless, it dies. If it's real, it gets addressed structurally, not emotionally. In relationships, someone accuses you of being distant. You don't explain yourself. You let them sit with their feeling. If they want clarity, they'll ask directly. If they wish to control, they'll escalate. And their escalation tells you everything. Most men are terrified of silence because they've been conditioned to believe that silence is rejection. It's not. Silence is a refusal to participate in a frame you didn't create, and that refusal is power. You've been taught that being available makes you valuable, that being responsive makes you reliable, that being present makes you strong, so you answer every message immediately. You make time for everyone. You show up when people need you. And over time, you notice something. The more available you are, the less people value your time. The more you give, the less they appreciate. You became abundant. And abundance has no power. Here's the structure. Attention is currency, and like all currency, it only holds value when it's scarce. When you give your attention freely, constantly, without cost, it becomes worthless. Not because people are cruel, but because value is always determined by scarcity. The more accessible you are, the less weight your presence carries. You see this at work. The person who's always available, always helping, always solving problems gets taken for granted. The selective person, who only engages when it matters, gets respected, not because they're better, but because their attention has cost. You have to earn it, and anything you have to earn feels more valuable than something given freely. You see this in relationships. The partner who's always there, always accommodating, always flexible, loses attraction. The partner who has boundaries, who has their own life, who doesn't rearrange everything to be available, maintains tension. Not because they're playing games, but because their presence isn't guaranteed. And uncertainty creates value. Schopenhauer understood that desire arises from a sense of lack. You don't want what you have. You want what you don't have. And the moment you become fully available, fully known, entirely predictable, desire dies. Not because you changed, but because the structure of desire requires distance. Here's the shift. You stop being available. You stop answering immediately. You stop rearranging your life to accommodate everyone. You create space. You protect your time. You make your attention scarce. And you watch the dynamic shift. People who took you for granted start reaching out more intentionally. People who ignored you start noticing your absence, not because you're manipulating them, but because you stopped giving them free access. And the moment access has cost, it has value. This isn't cruelty. This is a structure. You're not withholding punishment. You're reclaiming to protect. And the people who respect that, who adjust to that, are the ones worth keeping. The ones who get angry, who demand your availability, who guilt you for having boundaries, were never respecting you. They were using you. and now they're upset that the resource isn't free anymore. You've been conditioned to believe that your worth is earned through compliance, that if you follow the rules, meet the standards, and do what's expected, you'll be rewarded. So you comply. You work harder. You stay later. You do more than required. And over time, you notice that the reward never comes, or when it does, it's small, temporarily, conditional, and you realize you're not being respected. You're being managed. Here's the truth. The system doesn't reward effort. It rewards leverage. And leverage is not about how much you give. It's about how much you can afford to walk away from. The moment you become indispensable, you lose power. Because indispensable means trapped. You can't leave, you can't push back, you can't demand more. Because the system knows you need it more than it needs you. You see this everywhere. The employee who does everything, who's always reliable, always helpful, gets more work, not more money. The person who does the minimum but controls a critical function gets leverage. Not because they're better, but because they're harder to replace. The system values replaceability, not effort. You see this in relationships. The partner who sacrifices everything, who's always accommodating, always supportive, loses respect. The partner who maintains their own life, their own goals, their own frame of reference, keeps leverage. Not because they're careless, but because they're not desperate. And desperation is the fastest way to lose value. Schopenhauer would tell you that power is not given, it's taken, and it's only taken by those who are willing to lose what they have. Because the moment you're afraid to lose, you've already lost. You've accepted that your survival depends on the system's approval, and the system will use that fear to extract everything from you. Here's the shift. You stop being indispensable. You stop doing more than required. You stop proving yourself. You start holding leverage. You become willing to walk away. And the moment you're eager to walk away, the dynamic changes. Because now the system has to negotiate. It has to offer. It has to respect. Not because you're better, but because you're no longer controllable. This doesn't mean you stop working. It means you stop working for validation. You work for the outcome. You work for leverage. You work to build the ability to leave. And the moment you have that ability, you stop being managed and start being valued. You've been told that this is all just how life is, that everyone feels empty sometimes, that meaning comes from family, legacy, and contribution, that if you keep going, keep striving, keep building, that eventually it will all make sense. But it won't, because the structure doesn't change, the will doesn't stop, and chasing satisfaction will never lead to satisfaction. It will only lead to more chasing. Here's what most men never accept. You are not broken for feeling empty. You're awake. You're seeing the structure for what it is. And once you see it, you have two choices. You can go back to sleep, distract yourself, pretend it's not there, find a new goal and convince yourself that this time it will be different, or you can accept it. You can stop chasing meaning and pleasure, stop expecting satisfaction to last, stop believing that the system will reward you for your compliance. Schopenhauer didn't offer hope. He offered clarity, and clarity is the only real power you have, because once you stop believing the lie, you stop being controlled by it. You stop optimizing for a goal that was never real. You stop performing for validation that was never coming. You stop explaining yourself to people who were never evaluating you in good faith. You start operating from a different frame of reference, not happiness, not satisfaction, but presence. Not chasing, but deciding. You stop being driven by the will and start recognizing it. And recognition is control, not over the will, but over your response to it. You stop making yourself available to everyone. You stop explaining your decisions. You stop seeking approval from systems that only value your utility. You start protecting your attention. You start holding leverage. You start becoming scarce, and scarcity creates respect. This is not cruelty. This is not manipulation. This is realism. And realism is the only frame that doesn't collapse under pressure. Because it's not built on hope, it's built on structure. And structure doesn't lie. Here's what happens when you accept this. You stop feeling guilty for not being enough. You stop feeling ashamed for feeling empty. You stop pretending that everything makes sense when it doesn't. And in that acceptance, you gain something most people never find: freedom, not from the will, but from the belief that the will is supposed to make you happy. You start moving differently. You stop chasing validation. You stop performing the connection. You stop defending yourself to people who don't matter. You become calm, controlled, present. And that presence has weight, because it's not reactive, it's not desperate, it's not performing. People notice, not because you're louder, but because you're solid. You stop trying to convince anyone of anything. You stop managing how you're perceived. You exist. And existence without performance is rare, and rare is powerful. Here's your challenge. For the next 7 days, stop explaining yourself. Someone questions your decision. Don't defend it. Don't justify. Don't engage. Just let the silence sit. See what happens. Most of the time, nothing happens. The question dies. The person moves on, and you realize you were defending yourself from a threat that didn't exist. Stop being available. Don't answer every message immediately. Don't rearrange your schedule to accommodate everyone. Protect your time as if it were the only resource you had, because it is, and watch how the dynamic shifts. Watch who respects the boundary, and watch who gets angry. The ones who get angry were never respectful to you. They were using you. Stop seeking satisfaction. Stop believing that the next goal will fix the emptiness. It won't. Accept that satisfaction is temporary, that pleasure fades, that the will is relentless, and in that acceptance, stop chasing. Start deciding, not what will make you happy, but what you're willing to tolerate, what you're willing to walk away from, what you're willing to protect. This is not a path to happiness. Happiness is not the goal. Clarity is. And clarity gives you something better than happiness. It gives you power, not over others, over yourself. And self-control is the only control that matters. If this video made you see something you've been avoiding, hit the like button. Share it with someone who's still pretending everything makes sense. Subscribe if you want more reality, less comfort. And if this hit you, write "I am the strategist" once in the comments, just to mark the day your mindset changed. You're not chasing meaning anymore. You're deciding what you protect. And that decision is the only one that matters. Stay sharp.